Now on Daf Chav Dalet and Beis according to the Imam Yisrael Yachar Matan Torah Ha Eza Shmu Shmu Ba. What did he hear? And he came to join the Jewish people. He heard about Matan Torah, not just Amalek. Is Michael and Meimar? How could he have brought these karbanos from Midian, and they were purchased from the Goyim, the idol worshippers of Midian, and brought as karbanos at the time Moshe Rabbeinu, if it's after Matan Torah? El Yisro mi Yisrael Zovan. What happened was, and this was my answer from before, that there was a go-between here. It wasn't that they took the karbanos from Midian and they brought it as a korban. Rather, it went through the middleman of a Jew. Toshma, Vayomer Shmuel me'amalekei hevium. When Shmuel Hanavi says to Shaul, what are these animals that I hear about? I told you to destroy the animals of Amalek. And Shaul answers, oh, they brought it from Amalek. Asher chamal amal meitav atzov v'hakar, and why l'man zvoach l'Hashem Elokecha? The people spared the animals because they wanted to bring it as a korban. That's against Rabbi Eliezer. And where it says my meitav to me meitav, it doesn't mean that they brought these sheep and goats on the mizbeach, but rather they got the very expensive, beautiful sheep and goat, and they sold it, and they took the value that they purchased it with, and they offered it on the mizbeach, meaning they bought karbanos for the mizbeach. Umayshno meitav, and why did they buy the best? I mean, after all, the meitav is halach in the korban that you have to bring a korban in a meitav. Right? What's the word? Mi bechoros, right? Bechoros tzoneim, etc. They sold it at a great price because it was the best, the super duper level of sheep and cattle. All right, Toshma, what are we going to do with the following pasuk? David HaMelech is going to buy the land for the Mizbeach. Vayomer Arvana El David Yikach V'Yal Adoni HaMelech Hatov Be'enov. And Re'eh Habakali Olam V'Margim Uklei Habakali Eitzim. Okay, we'll see what Margim means, but anyway, Morrigan. So the people of Aravna, they said to David, hey, take the cattle, bring him as a korban ola on the Mizbeach. So again, we see clearly that the animals that we purchase from the Ovdei Kochavim are fit for the Mizbeach, Amram Rava, Arvana, Ker Toshav Hoya. Whoa. Now the Gemara introduces another concept. There's a Ger Tzedek who accepts in front of Bezdin all the 613 mitzvahs. Then there's a Ger Toshav accepts only the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach, as they were given by Moshe Rabbeinu, who received them at Sinai, and they accept that in front of a Bezdin Shel Yisrael. They become Ger Toshav, and the Torah says you have to keep them alive. And amongst the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach that the Ger Toshav observes, one of them is Gili Arayis, and Gili Arayis includes sodomy. So now we can assume that if Arvana sold, I keep getting his name wrong, if Aravna sold or offered these cattle for the Mizbeach rolos, he offered it as a Ger Toshav. There was no chashash of sodomy. My Morrigan, it sounds like in Yiddish we say Morgan. What does it mean? Amar Ula Mita Shel Turbil. My Mita Shel Turbil. All right, I don't know what that is either. Isa de Kurskisa de Daishan. A toothed goat that threshes. Oh yeah, it's a very special kind of goat. Omar Rav Yosef, my Kra, how do you know that this is a goat? Hine samticha lemorag chorush chadash pal pifios tadush harim v'tada orugvos chabos. Fine. Meisvei, I'll ask you a kasha. Yes, haparos helu ola lashem. So this is a pasuk in Shmuel at the end of Eli Cohen's life, when the Plishtim took and captured the Aron, and finally they gave it back to Klal Yisrael. and they sent back the Aron with cows. We'll soon see that the cows were miraculous kind of cows. Vesaparos helu ol Hashem. Now, the Philistines, the Palestinians of then, were idol worshippers, and yet they sent these cows, and Klal Yisrael received the cows and brought them as karbanos olah. And in instance, Rosh Hashanah, this was a whole different entity that overrides all the halachas that we know. And from the fact that there was a great miracle, and the cows brought the Mizbeach, the Aron, on the Agola, all the way to Beit Shemesh, that means that God wanted these cows to be brought as a korban. Now, honestly, I need a lot more time to analyze this halacha of Horosha, because Horosha is a matir on an Isser, but Horosha can't be machshir, something that's possible. And we said that these animals are chashid to be revia, to be psul of nirva. So what's Horosha? Horosha could magically take an animal that's pasul mizbeach and make it kosher mizbeach. So I have a feeling, but again, you have to really know Kodshim, that the psul mizbeach is a result of the Iser hakrava mizbeach. The Iser hakrava is what generates the psul karma. The karma is only possible because there was an Iser to be makriv this karma. If I remove that Iser, which I do through a Rosh, then in Mela, the psul is also likewise lifted. This had to be a Rosh. There's no such thing as a korban olah from a nekeva. All the korbanos olah, again I'm talking on the mizbeach of the tzibur. I'm not talking about a bomas yachid. Forget about a bomas yachid. I know you know zvach, but leave it out. Don't be an Ibra Chacham right now. So the problem here is, how could they bring a korban olah from a nekeva? There ain't no such thing. Ain't no such animal. So they brought these cows, which are obviously female because, they gave birth. And they brought them up as a korban olah. It must be Horas Shah. Or says, what are you talking about? We know the Gemara in Zvachim. Now we know there's such a thing as a Bamas Yachid. My Kusha. Dilma Babas Yachid, Ukir Rabbi Avoda, Avodim Rabbi Raminai, Liola Nekeva Shiksher Bamas Yachid. So again, now we'd have to spend a month learning the end of Zvachim about Bamas Yachid. And apparently when there's a Heter Bamos, which there was at the time, let's say, of Eli HaKohen, when the Aron was taken captive, and even though there was a Mishkan in Shiloh, but nevertheless there was still a Heter Bamos, so maybe they brought these karbanos from the cows that brought back the Aron as karbanos olah, despite the fact that they were female cows, midin Bamas Yachid. And therefore we don't need Horah Shah. Shenemar v'yikach Shmuel tlei cholav echa v'yaleu olah. And the Gemara says v'yaleu zachar mashma. Well, how does he prove here that on a Bamas Yachid you could take a female cow or a lamb as a korban olah? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'yaleha. There's what's called a kri and a ksiv. So even though the ksiv is in Lashon Zachar, Vayalehu, but nevertheless we read it Vayaleha. That's the Kri, which is part of the Masorah, and we read it as a female, and yet they brought it as a korban olah, and they were doing that because it was a Bamas Yach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Gvul Yeshla. We said that you're allowed to buy according to the Chachamim at least, an animal for a korban from an idol worshiper, and you can assume it's not a nirva. Why? Because through the revia process, the animal might become sterilized and lose its value on the market because people buy animals in order to breed them, to mate them. Again, if the guy gets a hold of a Jewish animal, then, let's say he's a shomer or whatever, he's definitely going to sodomize the animal. So Rabbi Yochanan says that this heter, which permits, according to the Chachamim, the animal for mizbeach, because we assume that the guy would not be roveh, he's afraid to sterilize the animal, that doesn't apply if the animal is less than 3 years old. No, I'm sorry. Just get the negative and the positive here. 1 second. Oh, yeah. That heter only applies if the animal is less than 3 years old, because then it will be sterilized as a result of the sodomy. If sodomized, then sterilized, because it's less than 3. However, basholosh shonim, if the animal is already past its 3rd year, or maybe it's into its 3rd year, it's past its 2nd birthday, then ain't an ekeres. And therefore, we have to be afraid that maybe the idolater would have no compunctions or inhibitions about doing sodomy to this animal because it's not going to sterilize the animal. Eisvei kol hani tiyufta. Then we're going to raise all the kashas that we raised before, that it seems that we bought the animals from goyim, in the case of Eliakon, in all those cases that we had, and we brought him on the Mizbeach. Shani lehu pchusi b'shalosh. And Rabbi Yochanan is going to answer that these are cases where the animal was less than 3 years old. So 1 second, I'm getting confused one more time. Just 1 second. All right. Because of its pchusa mibas shalosh, means it hasn't completed its 3rd year yet, then it would become sterile by virtue of the act of sodomy, and therefore we don't have to be choshesh that the guy sodomized his own animal because he's going to suffer financial loss. Toshma v'yes haparos helu olol Hashem. Once again, how could it be that they took these paros from the goyim, from the idol worshippers, and they brought it up as an olah? Let's say they're less than 3 years, and if we don't have to be choshesh for a revere, because we'd sterilize the animal. Maskif lo Rav Huna bereid Rav Nasan imkein hainu ves b'neim kolu b'bayis. Right? It seems that the suckling cows were tied onto the wagon and they confined their young at home, meaning they already had given birth. And pchusim b'shalosh shanim mika yolda, an animal less than 3 years cannot give birth. But Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah in Bechorot, Sadav Yutes, if you buy an animal from an idol worship, you don't know whether it gave birth or not. So that when it gives birth, you don't know if it has Kedushas Bechor of Peterechem, is part of a Chamor, Benos Shalosh, Vadai Lekoin. Right? If it's less than 3 years old, then you know that it's not yet Heterechem. In other words, it couldn't have had other children if it's so young. And therefore, if it now gives birth to the Jew who purchased it, then Vadi L'Kohen. He's got to give it to the Kohen as a Bechor. But Mikan V'elch, if it's after 3 years of age, then it's a suffix. We don't know whether this cow had ever given birth before, and therefore it's no longer Peterechem, or maybe this is the first time that the cow is giving birth and it's Peterechem. So the Kohen has the what's called Yodo Ala Tachtona, because Hamotzi Mechavel V'Raya. He can't produce a proof that this is indeed a Bechor, because maybe the mother had already had given birth before that, because it's more than a 3-year-old. So we have to go back to the original explanation that this is a Horasha. Without introducing Horasha, then you can't just tell me it was Pchusim Vasholosh because these cows had suckling youngs, which means they had to be after 3 years old. In which case the guy would have no compunctions about sodomizing the animal because it would not create sterility in the animal.
Right.
What was the song that these cows sung? By the way, there were no human beings that accompanied these cows. It was just the cows carrying the Aron. And they sang. Rabbi Yochanan, we have 5 different opinions about what they sang. Rabbi Yochanan, Shira. They sang a song. V'Rav Zutra bar Tuvia Omarav Sheyishru Pneihem Keneged Aron V'Yamru Shira. They had to turn their faces towards the Aron because it would not be proper for them to, for their backside to be towards the Aron. Umay Shira Omru Rav Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir Oz Yoshim Moshe Bnei Yisrael. Pillay Plum. They sang the Shira Sayam. Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar V'Amartem Bayomahu Hodu Lashem Kiru V'Shmo.
They were almost finished.
What do you say? So this is a kapitel in Tehillim. No, we didn't get to Tehillim yet. Now we're up to Yeshayahu and Novi. The cows sang, and you will say on that day, give thanks to Hashem, declare His name. Rav Shimon ben Lakish Omar, what did they sing? Mizmor Yasmo. Okay, this is Tehillim, and it's chapter 98. Mizmor Shir. What does it say there? Hodiyu Hashem Yeshuos Leni Agon Gilot Tzidkosa. Mizmor Shir Hashem Shir Chodesh Kin Flos Osa Shir Lo Yimizmor Kodsho. I think we recite that on Friday night. Am I right? Double check that. Anyway, so it seems that these are wonders that the Goyim were aware of. They, they sort of perceived the right hand of God, the holy arm of God. Hashem Malach Yirgezu Amim. Hashem has reigned, let peoples tremble. And again, why do they tremble? Because the Plishtim understood that by taking the Aron, they would suffer some sort of hemorrhoids anyway. Rav Shmuel bar Nachmeni Omar Hashem Malach Geus Lavesh, another kapitel in Tehillim. And it means that all the idol worshipping will be humiliated. They pride themselves in worthless gods, bow to him, and all fun. Rav Yitzchak Nafchamar, Roni, a brand new shear. Hashita. Shita is a kind of a wood that was used to cover the Aron. Hisnofufu barov hadarech, be exalted in your profound beauty. Hamachu shekes, the rikme zav, girded with golden traplings because it was surrounded by gold. Hamulola b'dvir amron mufara b'adein. Okay, now we get to Vayhi ben Saharon. Rav Ashi masnale lahad Rab Yitzchak. Vayhi ben Saharon vayom Moshe kumu Hashem. V'yafuto ivecha v'yanusu misanecha. Is Yisrael my Amru? Okay, we saw that the cows were singing. What were the Jewish people singing? Rab Yitzchak, Roni Ashita. In other words, that last opinion that we had, that there was a brand new created poetic song that they sang, the Jews also apparently mimicked that song. All right, there's a long discussion here, not for now, about the Sefer Torah Moshe Rabbeinu. Anyway, Omar Rav Kiman Kor Parsoy L'Sifra Devir. Why do the Persians call a book Dvir? And how do you know that they call a book Dvir? Me'hacha, from this pasuk, V'shem Dvir L'fnim Kiryas Sefer. So apparently, this pasuk in Shoftim says that the word dvir has a meaning in Persian that apparently is taken from the Hebrew words, because there were Hebrew words that became incorporated into new languages after the Dara Flaga. All right, we'll finish up. Amar Avashi, Keman Koru Parsoy Lenida Dashtana, Mehacha, Ki Derech Noshim Li. Okay, then this will stop. Thank you so much and have a meaningful fast.
Yeah, you too. Hagaz vash, goyach.